Yaps. It's in the name. All right, right now the war has seemingly kind of settled right now. The ceasefire seems partially in effect. We'll see how long it lasts. I have a funny feeling it's not going to last very long. I mean, we all know what Trump said about Iran and Israel, that they don't know what they're doing. But Mr. Travada over here is telling us four likely scenarios for the upcoming days. And I really like hearing this guy. I feel like he has a lot of base takes. I don't agree with them always, but most of the time I'm like, I see where he's coming from at least.
In just a
Like,
few
I
days,
understand it. I can
I have to make
rationalize
a
it.
new
I'm like,
forecast because things have changed so much, right? So let's do another set of forecasts for the next 7 to 90 days. What is, in my opinion, the most likely scenario, which is scenario A? The most likely scenario, in my opinion, is scenario A, which is a negotiated pause in the war after a high
Homie created a PDF slideshow about this? This is why I like him. This is why I like him.
intensity exchange. I think there is
Insane.
a
What's up, buddy?
70% likelihood of this happening over the next, you know, 90 or so days. So there could be first a high intensity exchange, peak violence in the next 7 to 21 days. Then there could be a ceasefire framework that could be developed in the next 21 to 45 days. So the likely outcome is that Israel and Iran remain locked in tit for tat strikes, okay, which will possibly include proxy attacks. This may happen for another 2 or 3 weeks, and then there could be possibly a Qatar backed uh, offer of ceasefire, or maybe Oman backed offer of ceasefire, right? And this could lead to a cessation of hostilities, and the bigger political issues are deferred for later. And if this happens, then the conflict will simmer down for a while, but it will leave behind a brittle Cold War, and sanctions will be tightened on Iran, and energy prices will be significantly higher. Right? So the assumption is that both nations, Iran as well as Israel, will recognize that the escalation is not sustainable. The escalation costs are not sustainable, and both nations will seek a face-saving exit. And this would not be good for Mr. Netanyahu overall, but there could be significant pressure on him to eventually, at some point in time, to accept a cessation of hostilities. And that pressure could maybe not come so much from domestic sources, but from the US. Right? So maybe most likely the US will prefer an off ramp. Mr. Trump needs a victory, but not a political, not a military victory. He wants a diplomatic victory. Mr. Trump has been complaining very vocally, very vociferously about not having received a Nobel Peace Prize. So if he can achieve a cessation of hostilities diplomatically, and that sort of thing, then that could bolster his chances for a Nobel Peace Prize potentially, right? So maybe Washington prefers an off ramp that avoids a new regional war and possibly nuclear.
We're living in a timeline where Trump literally can get a Nobel Peace Prize. Granted, as I've said, the conflict with India and Pakistan, Trump was able to go in there and negotiate and kind of work peace out there. I don't think he gets enough credit for that. But for a Nobel Peace Prize, I mean, shit, they give it to anybody nowadays, right?
Activities, right? And obviously, if you look at the Gulf region, the various monarchies in the Gulf region, they will prefer peace. They will prefer a stable neighborhood. So they may exert a strong economic leverage to protect the shipping lanes and prevent a wider outbreak of the war. So I think scenario A, um,
A little too
a
slow for me, brother.
negotiated pause of the war after high intensity exchanges,
There we
that is the
go.
most likely scenario. 70% likelihood over the next 45 or so days. And yeah, we've had historical precedents for that, right? Now the question is, how do I come up with these numbers, right? How do I come up with the percentage, and how do I come up with the
Yes, Tavada, how do
timeline?
you come up with these numbers?
So you look at various historical precedents,
Okay,
and you
like
look at
what?
other factors also. So what are the historical precedents?
I don't know.
So
You
you
tell
may
me.
remember there was the assassination of General Soleimani,
Yep,
Qasem Soleimani, by the Americans in
yep.
January 2020, just a few
He
weeks
died
or days
like a
before Mr. Trump
dog,
uh, lost power, right?
scared,
So
crying
that was a big escalation. But
like a
Iran's
dog.
response was a measured missile attack, nothing significant.
Yep,
So
agreed.
Iran has always, had this preference for tempering its responses. So which would indicate that Iran may be amenable to getting an off ramp and going for a ceasefire.
They're just bad at
Um,
war.
and then we have other historical precedents. There
Like
have been
what?
multiple truces between Israel and Hamas, mediated by Qatar between 2014 and 2021. And
Multiple?
even the 2006 Israel Hezbollah war, it ended in a UN Security Council brokered ceasefire.
Okay.
Yeah, so there are multiple historical precedents
I
that
didn't
show
know about
that
all
this
that.
should be the most likely scenario. Now, what is scenario B?
Okay.
And I'm doing 4 scenarios this time. Usually I do 3. So scenario B is a protracted regional conflict. This has a 20% likelihood of happening, in my opinion, over the next 3 months or so. A protracted multi-front regional conflict. So what happens is that there could be high tempo warfare that could extend for 30 to 90 days without a ceasefire. And so in this scenario, Israel will continue its systematic strikes against Iranian nuclear and missile sites. Iran will continue to respond, to retaliate through sustained missile attacks. It may also activate Hezbollah and the Houthis and Iraqi Shia militia coalitions and operations. There could be a disruption to the Strait of Hormuz, yeah, and that could cause a significant sharp tightening of global oil and LNG, gas markets. And the potential geopolitical impact of this is that the region could experience the most severe security energy shock since 1973. And that could cause the price of Brent crude oil to go beyond 120 a barrel. And maritime trade in this scenario will have to be diverted to the Cape of Good Hope, which is, well, severe. So that's scenario B, with a 20% likelihood of happening. And you've had historical precedents of this also. 1984 to 88, there was a tanker war that disrupted Gulf shipping. So it's happened. In 2019, there were limpet mine attacks on tankers amid the collapse of the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. And 2006.
Is this kind of what's going on with the Strait of Hormuz, where what was it? Some group was like, "Yo, no, don't put any ships in our water. We're gonna blow them the fuck up." Is that still going on, or are they kind of back down now that Iran and Israel are supposedly settled down?
There was the drawn out rocket exchanges during the Israel-Lebanon war. So these are all historical precedents that point in this direction. Scenario B with a 20% likelihood of happening over the next month to 3 months. What is scenario C? Well, scenario C is a nightmare scenario. Uncontrolled escalation, and the escalation reaches a nuclear threshold and a US-Iran direct war. I believe there is a 5% likelihood of this happening over the next 2 weeks to 60 days, 2 weeks to 2 months. Okay, this is an uncontrolled cascade. So in this,
we agree on this. I don't think it's a 0% chance, which is scary to say. I don't think this is a 0% chance. 5%, I'll allow it.
Very unlikely scenario. Some kind of a mutual miscalculation will drive Iran to sprint towards a demonstration nuclear device, a nuclear test, and Israel and the US will contemplate possibly massive conventional strikes or even potentially tactical nuclear strikes. And in this scenario, there could be open US-Iran naval and air clashes that could erupt in the Gulf region.
I hope not.
And the potential geopolitical impact of this disaster is that this would be the first open great power regional conflict, great power against regional power war of the 21st century. And this will trigger a global recession, and this will fracture the non-proliferation regime. And then multipolarity will essentially mean that every nation that is a...
I don't know about a global recession, because at least in American timeline, every time we've had a war, after that war, the markets had a boom.
Multipolar, one of the major poles will need nuclear weapons for safety, right? So this is a disaster scenario. And thankfully, in my opinion, it has a 5% chance of happening in the next couple of months. But it's a very, very scary scenario. And then what is scenario D? There's one more scenario.
It's a legitimate
scenario D
case.
Again has a 5% likelihood of happening, in my opinion, over the next 3 months or so. And this is a rapid de-escalation via a grand bargain. So we have seen this big shock. The US got involved directly.
I think
the US
this is more likely
directly
to happen.
against Iran.
I was trying to think in my head.
There could be potentially significant but incomplete damage to Iran's nuclear program. So maybe these things, maybe they convince Iran's leadership that a continued conflict is untenable.
Well, current leadership is mostly dead, so they're gonna have to get new leadership and kind of train them on how to be leaders first, right?
Simultaneously, there could be severe economic fallout, maybe globally, maybe regionally, and there will be concerted diplomatic pressure from a coalition of nations like the Gulf nations, maybe Russia, maybe China, maybe the Trump administration. Maybe these nations compel the Trump administration to pivot from a military action to deal making. Maybe there'll be the promise of of a Nobel Peace Prize for Mr. Trump, right? In that case, secret back channels could be activated, maybe mediation from Qatar, maybe from Oman, etc. And this could produce a framework for de-escalation, which could lead to a grand bargain for Iran, where Iran accepts severe and verifiable long-term nuclear restrictions in exchange for security guarantees and sanctions relief. So this has a 5% chance of happening over the next 30 to 90 days. And this would be a Nobel Prize winning move for Mr. Trump if he can achieve that. So Mr. Trump, I would say, has a significant vested interest in getting this to happen, and this is directly in opposition to what Mr. Netanyahu probably wants, which is a complete military victory and complete denuclearization of Iran. Right? So these are the four scenarios that I can think of.
Okay. There's abrupt ending right there, but no, those are four legitimate scenarios. I would hope that the de-escalation one is the one that is going to be the one that comes to fruition. I just don't really see that happening. I see more about like proxy wars, regime change, more conflicts, like internally. It just, until Iran could become a true democracy and get, the religion out of the government power and controlling and oppressing its people, I think Iran's just going to keep circling down the drain until it can figure that out. But as always, I challenge you guys, make somebody laugh today, be the light in someone's life, put a smile on someone's face, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.